Lord of the upper region, Lord of the lower region, regulator, Lord of Egypt, who has chastised the lands, Horus resplendent, keeper of the years, great by his victories, king of an obedient people, the guardian, son of truth, moderator of moderators, begotten by Thmu to exercise royal powers over the world for many days, son of the sun, beloved by Ammon, Ramses may he live. Christianity spread to the valley of the Nile. Crushed by long years of foreign domination, Egypt had preserved only traces of its great past. Hieroglyphic writing was no longer understood by the Egyptian people. Only the priests continued to practice it in the worship of the ancient gods. In 535, the Emperor Justinian closed the Temple of Philae, the last bastion of paganism. Expelled from their sanctuary, the priests of Isis took the secret of Egyptian writing with them into their exile and into their tomb. 15 centuries went by. On the 22nd of September 1822, a young French scholar published a note which had all the effect of a bombshell. It announced that Jean-Franc Champollion had discovered the key to hieroglyphics. The veil which hung over the 3,000-year-old Egyptian civilization could now be torn aside. The little town of Figeac in southwestern France has changed very little since Champollion's birth. Born in this house on the 23rd of December 1790, he grew up amid the turmoil of the French Revolution. The schools were closed, and there were no books. But the little Jean-Francois taught himself to read in a missal, by spelling out the prayers he knew by heart. A monk who was entrusted with his education took him on endless herb-picking expeditions, and on the way taught him the rudiments of Greek, Hebrew, and Latin. But his imagination soon led him away from his native Quercy towards a distant land spoken about with enthusiasm by his brother Jacques. 12 years his elder, Jacques Joseph was more of a friend than a brother, and he had often spoken of leaving for Egypt and joining the scientists who had followed in Napoleon's wake. His passion for history and ancient languages led him to a career as an archaeologist under the name of Champollion Figeac. It was he who first awoke his brother's genius, and throughout his life he was a source of both inspiration and encouragement. In 1801, Jean-Francois went to join Jacques at Grenoble in the Dauphiné region where his family had some connections, and it was here that he continued his education and at the age of 12 made a visit which was to change his life. One day the two brothers went to see the new prefect of the Isère department, the mathematician Fourier, the former director of the Institute of Egypt. This man had actually seen the monuments of the world's oldest civilization. He had led a team of scholars and artists who had gone out to gather material for a gigantic work. The Description of Egypt, whose 22 volumes would soon make an invaluable contribution to European learning. But the only way to shed any real light on ancient Egypt was to read the inscriptions. But no one had ever succeeded in deciphering their hieroglyphs. There was, however, a ray of hope, a black basalt stele unearthed in the Nile Delta by one of Napoleon's soldiers. The Rosetta Stone, as it came to be known, bore an inscription in 3 languages, 3 versions of the same text, including one known language, Greek. At last, a chance to decipher the hieroglyphs. But several eminent linguists had already tried and failed. "I'll decipher it," cried Champollion. "I'll decipher it when I'm grown up." Almost next door to the library where Jacques was head librarian was the school attended by Jean-Francois. He was an erratic pupil, very gifted at languages, good at drawing, weak at spelling, and hopeless at mathematics. He had a sensitive nature, easily bruised by the school's harsh discipline. He wrote to his brother, "The place in which I live plunges one into the deepest apathy. I'm being overcome by black thoughts again. How can you let me rot in this infernal hole?" But the hours sped away, hours during which in imagination he constantly returned to those fabulous times which held such fascination for him. He threw himself into a study of the languages of the ancient East. "I'm alone with my Hebrew. I'm translating the 4th chapter of Genesis because I want to know from the original the generations of the human race." Hebrew, Arabic, Syriac, Chaldean. He wanted to learn everything, even Chinese. "I don't know what to do after prep. Please send me Ludolphi Ethiopica Grammatica." Yes, Ethiopian too. Why this thirst for languages? How would he use the 15 or 20 languages whose grammar, vocabulary, and writing he soon mastered? Jean-Francois knew. Only a thorough knowledge of the ancient languages, and Coptic in particular, would enable him one day to decipher Egyptian writing. Many experts had wondered about the nature of these hieroglyphs or sacred letters. Carved in the walls of palaces, painted on the inside of tombs and mummy cases, simplified into symbolic tracings on papyruses, these signs had intrigued learned curiosity for 3 centuries. Did hieroglyphs represent sounds like our alphabet? There was nothing to support this. Or were these highly expressive drawings the direct representation of ideas? Some of the ancients, Herodotus, Hoar Apollo, Clement of Alexandria, suggested that hieroglyphics were an ideographic writing. Nothing was known of the nature of hieroglyphics, nor that of another writing used by the scribes, hieratic writing. The cursive writing they inscribed with reeds on papyrus had replaced, in the later centuries, a third kind of equally mysterious writing known as vulgar or demotic writing. However, if these forms of writing remained a mystery, the language they expressed, Egyptian, was not entirely unknown. It was thought to have survived in Coptic. Written with Greek letters, the Coptic language was spoken at the beginning of the Christian era by the descendants of the ancient Egyptians. Coptic was replaced by Arabic after the triumph of Islam, but still existed in the liturgy of the Christians of Egypt. Champollion was convinced that Coptic was a relic of the language of the pharaohs. When he came to Paris at the age of 17 to follow the lessons of the masters, he threw himself wholeheartedly into the study of Coptic. "I want to learn Egyptian like my mother tongue. I speak Coptic alone, since there's no one who can understand me." Thanks to Coptic and Arabic, he reconstituted the geography of ancient Egypt, the subject of his first book printed in Grenoble, where at the age of 19 he was taken on to the faculty to teach history. Champollion had acquired confidence. This witty, elegant young man shone with brilliance at the evenings of the Hôtel de Lesdiguières, wrote burlesque tragedies, and enjoyed acting himself. But these amusements could not distract him for long from his reigning passion. His brother's house at Vif, close to Grenoble, gave him the peace he needed for his research. In his study, he spent hours poring over a copy of the Rosetta Stone. Time and again, he went over the work done on the stone by the Frenchman Sylvestre de Sacy and the Swede Ackerblad. The upper part of the stone was much damaged, and the hieroglyphic inscription incomplete. Like his predecessors, Champollion paid particular attention to the second Egyptian inscription in demotic characters. He too hoped to find an alphabetical system in the cursive writing. One precious clue was the Greek inscription, a decree in honor of Pharaoh Ptolemy V, which contains several proper names: Ptolemaios, Arsinoe, Berenike, Alexandros. Ackerblad had succeeded in isolating these Greek names in the demotic text and discovered that they were indeed phonetic signs. But the alphabet worked out by the Swedish scholar was not sufficient to read the Egyptian text. Champollion thought he would do better. He perseveringly compared the demotic text with the Greek text, which he translated into Coptic, thus hoping to discover not only the meaning, but the phonetic value of the Egyptian words. He did the same thing with the hieroglyphs and identified many figures corresponding to the words in the Greek text. But after years of labor, he had still not succeeded in analyzing the Egyptian writing alphabetically. Champollion thought he had taken the wrong tack. For nothing in the cursive inscription suggested a phonetic principle. The case of the Greek names was an exception. The Egyptian graphic system did not express the sound of the words, only the ideas they contained. Champollion was about to change his methods and start all over again when an event suddenly brought his work to a halt. On the 1st of March 1815, Napoleon landed at Golfe Juan and marched across the Alps. There was panic among the royalists and enthusiasm among the opponents of the Bourbons. When Grenoble opened its gates to the liberator, the Champollions were among the first to acclaim the soldier of the revolution. While his brother Jacques followed the emperor to Paris, Jean-Francois lent his pen to a cause which was soon to meet defeat. His part in the 100 Days was to cost him dear. The jubilating royalist supporters were only too happy to take their revenge, and Champollion returned to Figeac in exile. He managed to earn a meager living as a schoolmaster. His health suffered, and he lived through fits of depression, fearing that someone else would get there first. And someone did. Dr. Thomas Young, an English physician who had applied his universal mind to the Rosetta Stone, which he sought to interpret through a material comparison of the three texts. In 1818, he published a glossary of 204 words, many of them identified with accuracy. He also mentioned the probable existence of phonetic hieroglyphic signs. Finally, he suspected a close relationship between the cursive writing and the hieroglyphs. Young had gone a long way, but he had not grasped the real nature of the system. For Champollion, the guesses of the English doctor soon became certainties. By comparing the three Egyptian writings, he had shown that hieratic writing was only a simplification, a tachygraphic representation of the hieroglyphs. As for the demotic characters, they were the ultimate deformation of the original signs. It was now proved that the three writings were all derived from the same system, that of hieroglyphs. So, since the Greek names were written phonetically in the demotic text, the same must be true of these cartouches, which were known to contain the name of Ptolemy. Young had suggested this reading: P-T-O-L-E-M-A-I-O-S, Ptolemaios. From his knowledge of Coptic, Champollion could correct to P-T-O-L-M-I-S, Ptolemis. An attractive hypothesis, but nothing was proved yet. The decisive phase of discovery was to take place in Paris. Champollion had decided to leave Grenoble, where he had married on his return from exile. He had taken rooms at 28 Rue Mazarine with his wife and brother. At the beginning of 1822, he received the copy of an obelisk containing 2 royal cartouches. He recognized that of Ptolemy, and he had reason to believe that the second was that of Queen Cleopatra. He checked them off sign by sign. P, O, L, I or E, K, A, R, T. Cleopatra. There was no doubt about it, these hieroglyphs were phonetic signs. With these 12 letters, Champollion completed the alphabet by studying royal cartouches of the Greco-Roman period in the plates of description of Egypt. He thus established the complete alphabet of phonetic hieroglyphs and their demotic equivalents. But was this phonetic notation limited to foreign names? On the 14th of September of the same year, he examined 2 cartouches from very ancient monuments. In the first, he recognized the symbolic figure of the god Ra. In the second, an ibis, the symbol of thought. In both cases, the inscription ended with a phonetic sign for S. In the center, a character which he found similar to the Coptic word mes, to give life. Ra gave life, Ramses, Thotmes. 2 names of pharaohs written with a mixture of phonetic and ideographic signs. In that instant, Champollion had grasped the very essence of Egyptian writing. It sometimes expresses ideas and sometimes sounds. "I have it," he cried to his brother, but at that moment his nerves gave out and he fainted. A few days later, he read to the Academy of Inscriptions and Letters his note to Monsieur Dacier concerning the alphabet of phonetic hieroglyphs, thus marking the birth of Egyptology. Jean-Francois had held his childhood promise, and at last he was heaped with honors and fame. He now had to set out the whole system of hieroglyphics. He set down the essential in a précis which appeared the following year. A look at Champollion's manuscripts will give us an idea of this curious graphic system. "No nation," he wrote, "has ever invented a more varied and more picturesque writing. Seven to 800 signs representing real objects or imaginary beings belonging to the universe of the Egyptian. Originally, this writing was probably little more than the painting of objects. The figurative hieroglyphs directly express the object or the action which they represent: the sun, the moon, a man, a horse. This is a case of a great many common nouns. Also figurative are the hieroglyphs expressing the idea of going or coming back, breastfeeding or childbearing, offering gifts or making music. The art of preparing wreaths, offering gifts, singing and dancing. Some ideas, honey, thirst, are expressed by evocations or symbols familiar to the Egyptians. But ideographic writing is incapable of conveying all the subtleties of thought. From the very beginnings of their civilization, the Egyptians used phonetic hieroglyphs to express their language. The word ro, meaning mouth, became a. Tot, meaning hand, became t.
Ret, rat,
Foot.
re,
Sun.
eoch,
Moon.
erp,
Wine.
eaou,
Glory.
eche,
Cow. Phonetic symbols form the largest part of the Egyptian graphic system, but the omission of vowels and the diversity of spelling make it difficult to read.
emsach,
Crocodile. The word crocodile could be written in 5 different ways. So to help the reader, the Egyptians added a figurative sign to the phonetically written word. A sign which could determine the species or gender, like this lotus flower, added to the names of plants. Or this water sign indicating a liquid, a flowing movement, or wetness. And so hieroglyphs became a jumble of signs, all expressing thought, some as phonetic symbols, others as imitations of objects. Champollion could now reap the first fruits of his discovery. First in Italy. In 1824, he went to Turin to study a collection of Egyptian objects recently acquired by the King of Sardinia. The key of the hieroglyphs opened up a hitherto unexplored world. Each inscription he deciphered gave him the name of a king, a date, a fact about Egyptian history. Another chapter of his work was now opening, the fulfillment of his great dream. On the banks of the Nile, monuments which had remained silent for centuries would at last yield their secrets to him. At the head of a Franco-Tuscan mission, which included the Italian Rossellini and a dozen archaeologists and artists, he landed in Egypt in the middle of the summer of 1828. He was immediately taken by the East. "I'm a new man," he wrote. "I wear an enormous turban on my shaven head. I've grown a large moustache and wear a scimitar at my side." He rode through the bazaars and streets of Cairo on donkey-back, the city of 1,001 nights. I prayed at the Mosque of Toulon, remarkable by its size and elegance, the finest Arabic monument left in Egypt. From Cairo, Champollion and his team went to Giza. They visited the Sphinx and the pyramids. But this was not the object of their mission. 2 large feluccas were already waiting, and Champollion was eager to leave for Upper Egypt. Thebes is there, and one always arrives too late. They did arrive finally, but only for a short stay. Long enough, however, to visit the capital of the pharaohs and the vast fields of ruins on either side of the great river. The Ramesseum is no doubt the noblest and purest site in Thebes. All the magnificence of the pharaohs. No people has ever produced architecture on such a grandiose scale as the ancient Egyptians. In Europe, we're only Lilliputians. The imagination reels before the 140 columns of the hypostyle chamber at Karnak. After 3 months of travel, which took them as far as the Second Cataract, Champollion turned back, stopping to revisit sites of particular interest. Abu Simbel, 2 temples carved in the living rock. The smaller dedicated to Ramses the Great. The larger temple is guarded by 4 60-foot statues. The heat is stifling. With the help of torches, the artist took drawings of the bas-reliefs, while Champollion and Rosaline noted the hieroglyphic inscriptions. Amada, Philae, Ombos, Edfu, Esne. Thebes once more, where they landed at the foot of the palace of Luxor. If Paris wants an obelisk, it should be one of those at Luxor. The finest is that on the right as you enter. The builder of the palace was Amenophis III. It was this pharaoh who commissioned the oldest buildings, those which stretch as far as the 14 45-foot columns. The whole of the northern part is from the period of Ramses the Great. During his 7-month stay at Thebes, Champollion made a critical study of the monuments of Luxor, Karnak, and the left bank of the Nile. He explored the necropolis of Gourna at Medinet Habu and the tombs of Biban el-Molouk, perfecting the methods which would be used by all those who followed him. Hundreds of pages of detailed notes. Thousands of drawings and colour sketches. A rich harvest for the newly born science of Egyptology. Champollion would never see the publication of his Monuments of Egypt and Nubia. His passion had driven him to the end of his strength. What prompted him to work on alone into the night in the tombs of the Valley of Kings? In the tomb of Ramses VI, surrounded by figures which illustrate the transmigration of souls and the voyage of the dead king through the shadows before re-emerging like the sun, Champollion must have had some strange encounters. I can trust no one but myself to copy these diabolical scenes which reproduce all the powers of hell and the customs of the other world. And to what world had he travelled when his friends found him unconscious the next morning? Champollion was an ill man when he returned to France, exhausted at the beginning of 1830. There was a seat waiting for him at the Institute and a chair at the Collège de France, but he was loath to accept the comforts of fame. His last remaining strength would be used to revise his manuscripts and perfect his grammar, the visiting card he would leave to posterity. And he had built a home for eternity at the Louvre. The Museum of Egyptian Antiquities, which he had founded and filled with treasures. A treasure house for the mind and the eyes alike. When he died, at the age of 41, on the 4th of March, 1832, Queen Caromama was ready to greet him with outstretched arms. It must have been like going home.